Root Capital is a social investment fund. We're based in Cambridge, just across the river, but we have field offices across Latin America and Africa. So basically, social investment fund, I don't know what your majors are, but just think of it as we're a bank for farming cooperatives. So we provide loans and training to, say, coffee cooperatives in Nicaragua. And that coffee cooperative then supplies to companies like Starbucks and Green Mountain Coffee. So we're sort of like microfinance, but on a larger scale. But for the most part, newly grads are hired in Cambridge. But again, we have more than half of our staff are based internationally across our field offices.
My company is Schneider Electric. We are about 130,000 employees in almost every country of the world. In the United States, for example, we have between 30 and 40,000 employees. Our headquarters is in Paris, and our second headquarters is in Hong Kong. And so our senior leadership of the company sort of splits their time between those two locations. We're a specialist in energy management, so we're focused on Green Planet and making different types of buildings and industrial process and so forth run in a more energy efficient way. We hire a lot of young people globally, U.S., Europe, Asia. We have a very extensive recruiting program and really looking to attract young and bright people to the company. And I think there's a lot to offer young people when they come in terms of career development, future education, continuing education and experience. So.
State Street, for those that don't know, big company headquarters in downtown Boston. We're essentially a big institutional investment firm. We're essentially a bank, but the second bank tonight that's a sort of somewhat non-traditional bank. Our clients are big institutional asset owners, which would be pension funds, endowments, sovereign wealth funds, central banks. So think of big institutions with a lot of money. And it's also big institutional asset managers, so think of the people who manage money on their behalf. And those are really the two types of clients for State Street. So we're not a traditional bank in the sense that you can go with a check and make a deposit or get a mortgage or an auto loan from State Street. We've had people try that, it doesn't work. We're in 29 different countries all over the world. Because our clients are big institutions, they're typically fairly sophisticated in how they invest money, and because they're investing money in a sophisticated way, it means that they're investing in really every major market all over the world. So that means we have to be in every major market all over the world. From an entry-level opportunity within State Street, we do hire quite a few undergraduates right out of school. We also are huge consumers of the co-op program. We have a lot of co-ops always there. I always have at least one on my team.
I'm Linda Cheatham. I'm a career senior foreign service officer. I finished my 31st year in the Foreign Service. Work for the U.S. Department of State. We implement the President's foreign policy all over the world. Our entry-level process for the civil service is we have positions opening up all the time. You apply for them the way you do for every U.S. government civil service job, which is through USA Jobs, and your career services staff here can certainly guide you in that. For the Foreign Service specialists, and we have 22 technical specialists, they also apply through USA Jobs, and you can apply for the Foreign Service anytime between the ages. You can enter the Foreign Service anytime between the ages of 21 and 60. We also have 10-week internship programs in the summer, spring, and fall that are designed to give you a taste of what it's like to really work in the State Department. We have our application deadlines for those well in advance because, of course, we can't let you run around the building unescorted unless you have a secret security clearance. And those take at least 90 days in our experience. You have to be a rising junior at least a rising junior, when you begin an internship. You have to be a student when you apply. You have to be a student immediately after the internship. Those are legal considerations mandated by Congress for such internships all over the government. We do have people get in straight out of university every year, but you can come in until you're 59 and a half years. What we look for in foreign service officers is people who have a commitment to public service, people who have an interest in cross-cultural engagement and have cross-cultural sensitivity. We look for people who have record of community service and other activities and inclinations that industrial psychologists tell us are predictive of success in the foreign service, because we want you for your whole career at whatever point you want to begin with us.
It's probably a little bit rare to go right from a U.S. hire and go abroad. Not to say it hasn't been done. We have a program called the Marco Polo program, which is relatively small and is designed for certain individuals that have show sort of exceptional talents, and we will recruit a small group there, maybe 10 or 20 a year, and we will put them right out of school, right into an international rotation. But normally the career path is something like a 2-year assignment in your home country to kind of get grounded in the company and learn your way around, get sort of acclimated and make a little bit of a network on your home base. And then after 2 years is when you would normally go into a rotation. And you can certainly, we encourage you to mention that when you're interviewing. There's absolutely no problem sort of coming in and saying, hey, I'd like to get started here, but my ultimate ambition is to work abroad. So we certainly welcome that and look for that.
I think my feedback would be fairly similar. We do have people who will, especially in the program I run, do begin rotations perhaps just before their first year, or certainly in their second year. I don't think we would hire very many people that are U.S. citizens directly into a role somewhere else in the world, unless they had some really specific language skill. Perhaps they had multiple passports and maybe had interned somewhere else in the world, which is a somewhat common theme, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years. So, but generally speaking, we see that as a year 2, 3 type occurrence.
Okay. All of the positions that I and my colleagues recruit for require U.S. citizenship, but the first 45,000 that I mentioned can be American citizens, often people who've married someone in the country where they propose to work full-time, and they stay on the job for years. But otherwise, we take foreign service, for the foreign service. For civil service, it's not very common to go abroad in the first few years of your employment. Foreign service, we bring you in for an orientation class, then depending on your first assignment, and the first 2 assignments are directed, that is to say you and your classmates get a list of assignments that are a little longer than the number of people in class, and you can state your preferences, but this is a window designed to facilitate your training abroad, so and to give you 2 different experiences in your first 2 tours. So depending on your assignment and whether or not it involves a country for which you need language training, you will almost invariably go into the consular training course, because virtually everyone in either or both of your first 2 tours, although both is rare, even if you're not a consular officer, you will have an experience on the visa line and doing American citizen services. Secretary Clinton used to call that our chief responsibility, certainly helping American citizens abroad. Once you have that training, we'll send you to your first post, and for some people, that means that within the first year, they're at the post.
Yeah, I would agree with Linda. In our situation, I'm thinking of 3 people specifically who are working for Root Capital right now in their 20s, and they're working in our field offices. And it's either because they're from that country we work in, either Senegal or Peru, or they have very close connections to that country, like Haiti. So yeah, it's not typical, it's not the majority, but it's not impossible either.
I do believe the options to travel, to take business trips abroad, are much greater in the first year or two than they get jumping right into an overseas assignment. And I think it's a really good way to get your feet wet. And as you're interviewing with companies, you want to try to get a sense of that as well, because boy, sometimes you might imagine, boy, it'd be great to have this international career, but it can be really lonely, it can be really kind of scary, and you're away from your family and friends, and it may not work out. So, unless you really know the country you're going to, getting a business trip or two there and meeting the local people and sampling the culture, visiting a few times is really nice.
I can tell you that for us, there are probably 4 or 5 languages that we're probably a little bit more attentive to than others. Certainly Mandarin. Latin America for us is a huge growth market. So Spanish, Portuguese, typically. We have a pretty healthy number of Asian clients. So also, in addition to Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and then I think a lot of the German, French. So it's not uncommon for us to have, at least in the program that I run, people that speak 3, 4, 5 languages, and I'm embarrassed at my own lack of language skills every time I talk to them.
Yeah, I think having getting grounded in one of the major European languages is good. So Spanish, French, German, very good. Mandarin and Farsi, they're not for everybody. I mean, it's a huge commitment, and you don't, unless you're really into that, and you excel at language and you want to put that effort in, make that almost a cornerstone of your early career, I would say. I don't think you need to do that. It's not; those languages are not the kind of languages you can go through the motions on and sort of pretend that you've done 4 years of Chinese, Mandarin. So I think getting a decent background in Spanish, German, French, even Italian, I think it's fine. Being an engineering major and somebody that totally blew off language when I was going through my formal education, I really regret it. So those of you that have sort of okay language skills, put a little extra effort into those courses and try to apply yourself. It's a hugely valuable tool later in life, and you're really going to want to have that if you're dreaming about an international assignment. Some people have a little more talent than others at absorbing languages. I get that, but even if your language skills are basic, do the best you can and take it seriously. Don't just say, oh, I'm just going through the motions and punching my card to get that, 4 years of Spanish or what have you. Just try to apply yourself a bit.
Well, we require you to get off language probation and be professionally fluent in one world language, which for us on a scale of 0 to 5 is a 3. That is to say, you can conduct business and you will not back yourself down in what I think of as alleys that you can only back out from, unless you're studying one of our really hard languages like Mandarin. We have 8 critically needed languages. We'll give you extra points if you learn those, and they include Mandarin and Farsi, Korean.
Well, I think Barry hit on the first part of your question earlier, and I would agree in that there's especially for someone coming right out of undergrad, if it's your first job and you're working in a large company. I think it's difficult even for people that have been at our company for 10 years sometimes to explain what we do. So, imagine you're 4 months in and you still don't know how to answer and tell your parents what the company you work for does, and now we've just sent you overseas to try to do it in a different culture and perhaps a different language. It's just there's a healthy learning curve that I think anybody needs to go through. I think the second, and probably a little, it's probably not this tactical from a company perspective, but as I said before, it's expensive in a lot of cases, and so I think and by the way, this happens not just U.S. out, but it happens for other employees that are in other countries coming here and vice versa. So I think there's a level of wanting to make sure that the person we're making that investment in is somebody that we feel is a high potential employee. And generally, I think we do a pretty good job, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree in their companies, of hiring good people, but it's not 100%. So you certainly don't want to take somebody that's not succeeding in their home country and exacerbate an issue by sending them somewhere else in the world. So I think there's some of that. But you know, stepping back from all that is all of these things sort of need to make sense for the respective firms. And so there's always, an employee has their own self-interest, and I think that's always important to probably any employer. It's when those self-interests happen to align with some sort of business interest in the company that these things start to happen. So if you have no experience, it's pretty unlikely that you're bringing a unique set of skills that we don't already have elsewhere in the world. So it just takes time for you to develop that.
So what's those folks that have done it and have sort of lasted well, that's a very good question. I see mostly people coming through rotations actually into North America from Europe as being much more just very much in tune with being outside of their country. And I don't know, maybe it's because of the environment in Europe, where many people in Europe are used to going from country to country all the time, and the countries tend to be smaller, and so the world, if the world is your oyster, you're going to leave that small country to begin with. And I think of a lot of British people, for example, British and Dutch people, for many centuries have been expatriates, and I think there is a cultural dimension there. So I don't know if that helps the people here that were born in the States sort of say, well, how do I become more British? I don't know if that's the answer, but I think it takes someone who can walk away from an awful lot that this country has to offer, frankly, and a lot of conveniences, everything from shopping to being in close proximity to your friends and family who you'll miss dearly, and it's I think it's those that last have a sort of, they build a support network when they get over into the new assignment, so they tend to have a spouse with them, they'll start a family, or they'll marry someone abroad, and they'll build a world around themselves, and then once you do that, you've replaced the kind of network you have now with another network. I think that's when you begin to be able to do this kind of for the long term. And when I think of the people I know that have done this for many, many years, that's sort of what they've done. They've built that, they've replaced kind of, or they've augmented their home network with this kind of new network. And because it's, no matter where you are in the world, you don't want to be alone typically. You want to have some friends and families.
That's what we say in the Foreign Service, that it becomes, some people call it a lifestyle, but I think it's definitely a way of life in which the people you work with, the people you socialize with in that environment have had similar experiences, understand it, your kids go to school together, your spouses are friends, you know each other, you run into each other in different countries, and stay friends.
And you probably need to like foreign experiences. I mean, some people like being home and being safe, and I know with me personally, the first chance I had to get on a plane and get out of here, it's just I took it and I jumped at it. Never look back, but that's just me. Not everybody wants it. It's a good question. So it happens all the time. If I understand the question, it's so your boss comes to you and say, hey, we have this great position open in whatever country, we really think you'd be great at it. We want you to go, and you go, well, gee, I just started dating this guy. I really like him, and my life's coming together and all this kind of thing, and I'm not ready, or my someone's sick in the family or what have you. There's often things going on, And I would say the way that we look at that is we will ask the person so many times. We get it, absolutely. If there's a life event taking place, we definitely don't. The first time we don't, you know, we just, okay, fine, we'll tuck it away. Maybe next year or the year after we'll ask you again. I have seen many times where it becomes a pattern with this person, and the person's like, oh yeah, I want an international assignment. Then we ask, well, you know, I'd rather go to Italy than Paris, you know, or I'd rather, you know, and then like the excuses just start to build over a few years, and then you just stop asking. I mean, it's like, okay, you know, you mentioned this, but we can't quite get it dialed in. So when you're really ready, you let us know again. But we're going to kind of take you off the list, and we actually have a list. I mean, we keep a list, a database, and a rotation database that we know everybody that's in that database. And if you get a free pass the first time or two. But if it goes on too much, then you would be removed off the list. And we would tell you we're going to take you out of rotation.
We could let you go if you don't go abroad after you've been in the States 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had this experience a couple months ago. I was, you know, knocking down the doors for them to send me to a Spanish-speaking country, and they let me go for a couple of months. I lived in Mexico, and I traveled throughout Costa Rica and Guatemala, and the first thing was to tell my boyfriend, who was not so happy. But the thing is you start, you know, this type of lifestyle, you know, like everybody has been saying, it's professional and it's personal. And so I'm dating an expat kid, basically. He grew up in Singapore and across several different countries. So he understands that sort of innate desire to want to travel and get up and move, and also make roots in that new culture. And so that was, you know, he understood that. And at the same time, throughout our organization, we are sort of experiencing that struggle as, you know, individuals. We actually have regional retreats every year where we sort of come together as a staff. And one of the components this year is actually talking about work-life balance. Because there's a lot of staff in their 30s that want to have kids, and a lot of them travel a lot, and it's really hard for them and their families to figure out if this is sustainable for a family. And so those issues can get pretty sticky, but there's certainly a balance that needs to be struck with this type of work.
But, you know, I think also that the job, you need to be smart about what job you take. There's bad jobs here and there's bad jobs overseas too. And you know, and sometimes companies they think it's a great job, and it maybe not be a great job. So you have to be pretty wise about selecting your assignments. It's your career. It's not anybody else's career. So if they're sending you someplace that's a little sketchy, and you know, the assignment isn't piquing your interest, don't do it. Find something else. So.